Right. Hey class, this is Young and Nick again. Nick is very generous for donating his time again to show you guys how to write story. For this recording, we're going to demonstrate how a story is supposed to be written for agile methodology and the kind of question you should ask during your story time. I'm going to leave the floor to Nick.
Hi. I'm the product manager for a really technical application that involves a lot of math. And so, in order for you to not understand a lot of weird, complicated math, I'm going to write some stories for something that I don't have any experience in, but I think everyone can relate to, and that's online checkout for any old website. So it doesn't have to be something specific; it could be anything. So let's say that I'm the product manager for a website, and the business is asking me for the functionality to be able to buy something with, let's say, Venmo, which is like a new thing. Credit cards have been around forever. Um, so I would meet with the business, and they would ask me for this new functionality, and they would say something along the lines of like, "Hey, we've identified that a lot of customers lately have Venmo accounts, and they'd really like to be able to buy things on our website using their Venmo accounts. So we need for you to go into the website and enable checkout using Venmo." Um, and so I'd say, okay, great. So we're going to break that into a couple different things. The first thing is an epic. So an epic describes the largest piece of functionality that they're looking for. In this case, it's Venmo purchasing, Venmo payment on the checkout. Um, so um, sweet, you can see that. Okay, epic is Venmo payment. And so I'm going to then take that and try to break it into the smallest possible pieces that I can think of to ask for my developers to go develop. And so there's a couple different things that if you're a website, you might need to consider. The first is, do we need a separate button to indicate for the user to indicate to us that they want to pay with Venmo? After they've indicated they want to pay with Venmo, do we need to have any different steps downstream? How do we integrate with Venmo and actually get the money from them? And how do we indicate to the users that, oh,
Do it 1 week.
okay, sorry, little technical difficulties, but we're okay now. How do we indicate to the user that their purchase was successful, and then go the rest of the way down the line and make sure that the user gets their stuff?
Mind if I use the term to see if I can connect this one?
Sure. Okay, so Venmo payment. So the first thing I'm going to do is break this into a couple different stories. The first thing I'm going to say is I need for the user to indicate to me that they want to pay with Venmo. So story one, and we're gonna then go into these stories here in a minute. Is add Venmo button. I abbreviated it so that it fits on that one piece of board. Story two, build Venmo detail screen. So my thinking here is after I press the Venmo button, I need to take the user somewhere so that they can indicate or give me detailed information about their Venmo transaction. Like what is your Venmo user word and password? What is your Venmo account number? Whatever that might be. Story three. And I'm sorry that I'm doing lots of writing and not talking. But for story three, I'm thinking we need to be able to integrate with Venmo and actually collect the money from them. So story three is, we're going to call this Venmo integration. And as I'm writing these stories, there's a theme. There's a way of thinking that I'm trying to go through. Is what is there's a balance. What's the smallest piece of functionality that I can have my developers deliver while still giving me some business value? And that sort of starts the beginning of thinking about minimum viable product, which is going to be different no matter where you go. So an MVP or minimum viable product for a website. Hold on, let me get kicked out.
Go.
Okay, sorry about that. We got kicked out of our last room, so we've relocated to a new room, and I've written stuff back up on the board. So before we get interrupted, I was talking about minimum viable product. And the idea of minimum viable product is what's the smallest thing that we can deliver that still gives the business some value. And the common example that's used is a skateboard and a car. So if the business were to ask to get from A to B, the easiest, quickest thing that you could deliver is a skateboard. You put a board on top of some wheels, and then they can use that to get from A to B. But then, over time, you can start to enhance that skateboard. And so maybe they're not very good at balancing, and you put a handle on it and make a scooter. And then they want to go a little bit faster, so then you make them a bicycle or something. And then you make them a car without a roof. And then you make them a car with a roof and a steering wheel and air conditioning, and they can still get from A to B, but there's a bunch of bells and whistles they have now that makes getting from A to B easier and simpler. And there's a whole, you could break that up into a whole list of user stories or whatever. But back to our example here for our Venmo payment system is we've just written story 3 for Venmo integration. The ability to call Venmo, get information from them, get money from them, and then return to Venmo some sort of acknowledgement of that. So it's my job as a product manager to keep those high-level technical things in mind. Like, okay, we're going to have to ask Venmo for something and let Venmo know that we received it, but it's my developer's job to know the details, the intricacies of how that works, which you'll see me and Young may do a little back and forth later as far as what that conversation might look like. And then my last story here that I can think of at a high level is story number 4. I'm going to say success message. So if I was buying something from a website, I would want to know that my transaction was completed successfully and that my money has gone somewhere and that I will end up getting something in return. So we've broken this up into 4 stories under our epic for Venmo payment for the website. So let's go into one of these stories. Need an eraser? Let's go into one of these stories and sort of write it out like we would if we were in Pivotal Tracker or Jira or any of those backlog trackers.
Can you also show them how to write story using the Jenkins format?
Yeah. I think I'm still recording, but your screen went black on me.
Yeah, you're still recording.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so there is the idea of Gherkin format. And Gherkin, pure Gherkin is given, when, then. So given some state or some beginning state, when some variable or criteria, then my expected behavior. So given state, when variable or criteria / criteria, then behavior or outcome. Another way to write this is ask yourself 3 questions. Who wants something? What do they want? And why do they want it? So we'll write that here as well. Just who, what, and why. And so these 3 things here correspond to these 3 things here. Gherkin and what I've written above is excellent for technical requirements, sort of like the application that I manage now, where there's a lot of math and there's a lot of system-heavy sort of back-end stuff. This is great for our example here, and I actually may use this for our example here. Who, what, and why. And so let's get this out of the way now, and let's write a quick story for adding a button to our checkout screen. So I'm going to say first, who, right? And this will look like this. I'm still on the board. As a customer, on the checkout page, So note that's specific. That is a customer on the checkout page. That's not a customer on the home page or an admin on the back end. I'm saying as a customer on the checkout page. So that's my who. That's my first thing. Next is my what. I want to be able to select Venmo as a purchase option. So I want a button to select Venmo as a purchase option. Button to select Venmo as a purchase option. All right, again, that's specific. That doesn't try to get into my who or my why. It just says what I want. I'm asking for, as a product manager on the behalf of the business, who am I asking for? I'm asking for this customer checkout page. What am I asking for? I want a button to select Venmo as a purchase option. And then why? So that we can capture sales from customers with Venmo accounts. Okay, so there's our user story. It starts off a little, or it's pretty basic. It's pretty basic functionality. It's just adding a button to a page. But this should be enough so I could give it to a developer and they would understand what I want by just putting it into these three things here, which is Gherkin or Agile methodology. So then, once I've written a bunch of these stories, so we had 4 stories earlier, I would do this for all 4 of the stories. And sometimes they are longer or more complicated, and sometimes there's multiple sets of these criteria. So this is one set, right? We're going to call this set 1. But maybe I need to add 2 buttons to that page. There's different ways of thinking. Some people would say it needs to be 2 stories, and some people would say you could have multiple sets of criteria in there.
Sorry for interrupting, but then as a developer, right, whenever you receive these kind of stories, what the first thing you should ask is, all right, so I see that you want a button so the customers can click on it and start the checkout process, but do you only want a button on the checkout page, or do you want the button on any other page as a convenient location for like a shortcut for the customers? And then, does it matter the color of the button? Can I use any color? Can it be red? Red usually is for a loading situation, right? So you shouldn't really use red. Those are the kind of questions you should ask for confirmation.
Absolutely. And so after I've written all of these stories, I work with Young, who's one of my developers, and all of my developers, and I put this up on the board in front of them, and I say, hey, here's what I want, here's why I want it, here's who I want it for. After I've presented that story to them and explained it, they start asking me questions just like that. And oftentimes, I'll have more detail below this that is not written in this format. And so this is where you can kind of go off the tracks a little bit and find out what works best for you. So I found that for my group, too much of this gets us lost. And so sometimes with my group, just with my group, because I've worked with them for long enough, I can say, after I've written 1 or 2 of these, I can say color equals blue or something like that. And I can go through and just details like that rather than saying, as a customer, I want a blue button so that it doesn't look like an emergency button. I'll put this in the story and I can talk to them about it. And they'll say, oh, okay, that makes sense. Or, oh, that doesn't make sense. You need to go back to the business and ask them, a blue button makes no sense. You're the Home Depot or you're whoever. You shouldn't be using blue.
Right, and after we receive the story and finalize all the details, the developer should then give the product manager, in this case Nick, an estimation on how complex this story is. Depending on the format that you use, most applications nowadays using a POI system usually have 2, 4, and 8. 2 would be something relatively easy, 4 would be moderately complex, and 8 would be super big story. Anything that you estimate with an 8, you want to break that story into smaller chunks. You want story with 2 pointers and 4 pointers. You don't want any 8 pointers. With this though, everything seems pretty straightforward. We know the exact color that we want. We know the exact place of the button, where the button should be on the website. Specifically, gonna be in the checkout page. I'm gonna say this story. It's gonna be like 2 points. It's really really easy.
And so that's about it. I mean, you could go on for a long time about any one of those things that Young just touched on. Everyone points their stories differently. Some people want to point with the product manager there. Some people don't want the product manager to be around when they point. Some people do 1, 2, 3, 4. Some people do 0, 1, 2, 4, 8. Figure out what works best for you with pointing and with story times and with stories. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach. You can be if you can be doing something else that helps your team do work quicker or more efficiently or better, by all means adjust this to fit. But this is sort of the template or the form of how you start writing a good user story, and the things that if these 3 questions are answered, you'll have a good user story written, and your story time will go well.
All right, thanks Nick. Thank you so much for your
Thanks,
time.
Sean. Yeah, you're very welcome.
Appreciate it. Bye class.